Welcome to the Rift Season 4 guide. This is primarily going to cover your best options early on in Rift, because as you do more Rift, you'll gain these Rift controller levels, which let you unlock a bunch of dimensional forms. And these forms can drastically change your team building, because they'll make your units a lot stronger. Like here, we have stuff that boosts knights. And then also, specifically for this Rift, you'll have some devices that only work if you only have 2 units or only 1 unit in there. And this one also only works for rangers. So as you get higher control levels and do more Rift runs, it'll get easier and easier for you to clear Rift. And especially since we're going to be doing solos or duos at the end, this means that a lot of the units we're using are just going to be temporary until we get higher RCs. Looking at the devices, it seems like Robin should be able to solo pretty easily at RC21. It might be doable at RC15, either Robin solo or just Robin duo. With that in mind, I think besides Robin and Hazel, you don't need to build the best in slot units. You should just use whatever you already have built, because you would be building units to use them for a pretty short amount of time and then just stop using them once you hit higher RCs. In this case, it happens that the best units, at least at RC2, happen to be the cheapest ones, but even in this slot here, because 3 unit, cheap to build, Robin on banner right now, and also just the best in slot unit. This slot here, whoever you have built already for here would work between all of the different options. Grace of Growth is also available, of course, so you could opt to put the unit in there until you hit RC21, but Grace of Growth does not work for specialty changes, so do keep that in mind. I went over the mechanics in my previous video, but to summarize, we're going to need attacks that hit all allies. We're going to need to hit the boss while it's debuffed, and we are going to need to be buffed and then attack the boss. Also, burns and bleeds have their damage greatly amplified by this shackle effect, which also increases damage taken by AoEs, as well as the Rift controller increases your damage dealt by just normal attacks in general, and also burns and bleeds. The boss also has a lot of 90% damage reduction against single target attacks, so you kind of do really want to be using AoEs. And then let's take a look at all of the devices. So for row 1, or I guess they're called forms now, for row 1 we have on the left one, this one is for Robin. It just makes it so her S2 extends debuffs. This is going to be her best in slot 1. If you're not using Robin, then if you're using a burn based comp, then use the burn one. If you're using a bleed-based comp, then use the bleed one. Bleeds are generally worse than burns, just because bleeds do half the damage of burns, because it's only 30% attack versus 60% attack scaling on the debuff. But the unit for actual bleed versus burn might be better, so you'll want to check the team comps later. RC8 is when you get your next one. This left one is for Robin. So this one you only really use if you're not using the other 2, or when you're soloing with Robin at the end, which I guess would also make you not use the other 2. This one's only if you use Thieves. I think this one you only use as a backup if you don't have Robin and you're using Surin instead. That's the only case you would use this one, I think. And then this one is for pretty much only Charlotte. There's like no other unit that uses this properly. This just makes Charlotte's attacks do more damage. This one is, once you hit RC15 and RC21, you start getting some devices that only work if you're using 1 or 2 units. So this one is when you only have 1 unit, and it also only really works with Robin. Every 2 AoEs decreases skill cooldowns by 2 turns. Reading this, I believe this makes it so she can S3, S2, S3, S2, S3, S2, and you never have to use S1, so this is really, really good. But I think you also probably ideally want to be RC21 before you start fully using this. Maybe you could solo at RC15. This one is the duo device. This makes it so that when you have 2 or less allies, everybody gets greater attack buff and vampirism permanently. This is the duo device. Not sure if you can start soloing at RC15. This is something I need to check, because I'm going to push RC15 very, very quickly. But I'd imagine that you probably can start duoing. And this just basically makes it so they have lifesteal and also attack. As long as you have enough damage to sustain up, you'll be okay. Only thing is, for something like Robin, if you're trying to duo with Robin, you might need a crit based build for now, just to actually benefit properly from the vampirism, since most of your damage is from the burns. And then Form of Mages, this is just for a full team. This really only works with Aramintha. If she uses her S2, she'll inflict 2 burns for 2 turns. Mercedes, I was floating the idea of 105F Mercedes to just spam burns, because her S2 extra proc does still work, but I think by RC15, you're kind of looking to duo or solo anyways, so I don't think the regearing is worth, but that is a potential option. This is mainly just Aramintha, maybe some funny Mercedes build. And then here, this one is, if you're 4-manning and you still need a Soul Weaver, then you can use this one. Makes it so that after you use a non-attack skill, it weakens all of the authorities once, and it can only be granted once every 2 turns. This one is a solo one. This one, I think it's a very funny way of doing it. This makes it so you only have 15 turns to kill the boss, but in exchange, you get 6 stacks of Shackle on the boss, plus you max out your crit chance and crit damage. You have to solo though, so you can't even friendship farm, which kind of sucks, but this would be the Robin one. And then for the duo one, this pretty much forces you to use Charlotte, I think. But you have 30 turns to kill the boss, and it also maxes out the Shackle. You don't get max crit, but instead, when the knight in the front uses an AoE, it extends burns on the target by 1 turn. Maybe you could use like Candlestick Cecilia or something. That's something I also need to test. Maybe Candlestick Cecilia works, and you can just hopefully proc it enough where you can use an AoE every 2 out of 3 turns, but we'll have to see. In general, left, 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 middle if you're doing Robin solo. For duos, it's probably, let's assume you're not using Robin. Let's say you're trying to do like Aramintha and Charlotte. It would probably be middle, right, middle, right. And if you're doing a theoretical 4-man team with no Robin, then either burn or bleed, depends on your team. And then I'm assuming you're using Surin, so it'd be like this one. And then if you have a mage, then this one. I guess you don't really have a choice, you kind of have to use this one with the Soul Weaver one if you're doing a 4-man team. Also, of course, as you gain RC, you also increase your damage dealt, and also increase the damage dealt by burns and bleeds. This was the HP remaining on Rift after I did a run with all of these teams. These teams were done with my new account, so the gear on the account is not fantastic. I will do a run with what I consider to be the best team on my main, just to see the damage potential on it, because I'll have better gear and be able to tune stuff better. One thing we're considering is Mercedes is probably the best geared unit on my account out of all of these units, just because of the way the free gear works. But even with that in mind, Mercedes does more damage than Charlotte, I'm pretty sure. The best team that I found was, assuming you're using Robin, Mercedes and Carrot had the best damage together. I think one thing is because of the way devices work, is these 2 units are going to get boosts at some point. So there's Charlotte, who's a knight, and Aramintha, who's a mage. If I swap back here, we can go to the devices. Charlotte gets a boost at RC8, increases her damage dealt more for Shackle on the target, and then Aramintha gets burns on her S2. So they do get some slight boosts once you hit RC8. But like I mentioned, because this is just a temporary thing, at RC15, or Aramintha gets hers at RC15, and by RC15 you might be Robin duoing. So even if they do end up passing Carrot, especially because here we're almost a 2-shot here with better gear and a higher RC level, just off of the damage boost from the controller level alone, we would be able to 2-shot. So I don't think it's really worth building Charlotte, even if she passes Carrot at RC8, just because of how expensive she is. But Carrot had the best damage out of these 3 at RC2. Aramintha was second, and Charlotte was right after, though these 2 are pretty much neck and neck. Whoever you have built, just use them. Like, if you have Aramintha built from that one RTA season, a couple seasons ago, then you can use her over Carrot. It's not going to be the end of the world. Or if you are a super old player and you have Charlotte built from when Charlotte was super OP, then you can use her too. It's going to be fine. And since Mercedes just outdamaged everybody in all of my tests, I would say you probably want to be using Mercedes. If you don't want to use Mercedes for some reason, these were the other teams that I tested. Robin, these all assume Robin Hazel. There's Carrot, Aramintha, and then Carrot Charlotte was pretty much neck and neck. About the same as here, like Aramintha and Charlotte did pretty similar amounts of damage. And then we also have Aramintha Charlotte. For these runs where Aramintha is by herself, you want to use her EE that detonates on S1. I'll go over all of their stats later, of course. But detonating is actually pretty good in this fight, which is one of the reasons I'm using Carrot, because of the debuff cap. Detonate just lets us clear up more space to land more debuffs. And I did a bit of testing for teams without Robin. The Surin team honestly did better than I expected. Bleeds are really bad because they have half the damage of burns. And bleeds are 30% of your attack, burns are 60%, so it's literally half damage, but I think Surin puts out enough bleeds that it kind of doesn't really matter. I use Charlotte here, even though she's a premium option, just because I was testing, and this damage was pretty good. If you don't have Charlotte, your options are pretty limited. It's like, I don't know, maybe like Ball and Sezin just for the AoE, because you need a bit more AoE besides just Mercedes. It does get pretty stuffed without Charlotte, so that is one thing to keep in mind. Your damage is going to go down a lot. It would maybe Ball and Sezin, maybe Kana if I can find her. Maybe Kana, maybe Ball, something like that. So yeah, if you don't have Charlotte, your damage definitely is going to go down a lot, so this is a bit deceptive. I was using Charlotte because I did not think it was even going to do this much damage. So if you don't have Robin, it's going to be these two. I'll look a bit more in-depth at non-Robin teams later on, especially at later RCs with some of the later devices. But for now, it's just this. Surin does good enough. She also gets a little boost at RC8 because there's a thief extension device, or debuff extension device rather. That is it for all the teams, and now we can take a look at everyone's stats. I mentioned earlier that this is on my new account, so the gear is pretty scuffed. There's a lot of things in these builds that aren't perfect, and I'll mention what I think should be fixed, but it'll still give you a general idea on how to build these units anyways. We can start off with Mascot Hazel, because she's going to be in every single team, at least for our early runs. Mascot Hazel, just give her some bulk and speed. Pretty much the speed is just for speed tuning. I just wanted to put greater attack buff up, and that was it. Her stats don't matter otherwise. It's literally just enough bulk to not die when she's frontlining. For her artifact, I gave her no artifact, just because of accessibility. But you should give her either Rod of Amaryllis, or Celestine, or Touch of Rekos, if you need the healing. Celestine, Touch of Rekos, or even Shamadra Staff if you're really desperate. Just anything that increases your healing if you find that you need it. If you don't need it, then you should give her something like Warhorn, or if you don't want to use up your Warhorn here, you can give her Super Duper Water Shooter or Cardiswell Miracles. And then I can show, well, her skill enhances. I didn't enhance her S2 and S3, which is why my healing feels a bit low at sometimes. If you max these out, the boss does not do a lot of damage. I think you'll be fine. If you just have these maxed out, these are definitely worth enhancing with how much Hazel gets used. You can also take a look at her skill tree. For her skill tree, I took everything except for this one, just because you don't need the spell generally. The unhealable doesn't matter. The continuous healing is also not that relevant. It's also an RNG proc chance anyways. And this one increases the effectiveness. This one's actually probably worth picking up if you need it. I didn't, just because the way my gear works on this account, I overkill the effectiveness by a lot. But this gives you up to 10% effectiveness. So this could be really useful if you find yourself needing a bit more effectiveness. So I would say skip these three. You need to enhance them once to reach the later ones, and then this one depends if you need the effectiveness or not. Next, we can take a look at Robin. Robin, she's going to be able to solo later on. Very, very good. For skill enhances, you want -1 turn on her S3. You don't care about the death break, at least in Rift. Maybe in PvP you'd want it. And then here, you have the effect chances on her S2, I would say this is all you really need as a minimum. Her S1, these bleeds do damage, but once you hit RC21 and you start soloing, she's not going to be using S1 anymore, so this isn't really a long-term thing. You could get it if you want to, though. I don't think it's that important. And then her build, you're mainly trying to prioritize attack. It's just attack with... You need 105 effectiveness, though Hazel does give you effectiveness, so make sure to factor that in. A little bit of bulk, just because you're going to have spare stats. And beyond that, you don't need this much speed. Ideally, if I could change her build, I would make her a little bit slower, and move a lot of the speed into her attack instead. This is just because Rift gates you by your turns, not the boss's turns. So as long as you're like moving fast enough, I think you'd rather just slow down and do more damage instead. It's a pretty minor thing though, definitely something worth fixing. You can take a look at the individual gear pieces here. One of the reasons I even sped her up this much with this helmet specifically is just because I was trying to speed tune some stuff, but you could definitely slow her down. And then for her artifact, you can use her personal artifact. I also think Prophetic Candlestick is going to be solid. It's just because Candlestick is honestly really good in this fight in general. Just because a lot of your important abilities on pretty much all of your units are on S2 and S3. You don't really care about S1 that much. So you're going to be looking to spam your S2s and S3s, and cooldown reduction is going to help out a lot with that. Once you hit RC21 though, and you start doing the solo, because of the device that reduces your skill cooldowns, Candlestick becomes pretty useless, at which point you can either look to use her personal artifact, or you can give her something that boosts her attack, like Warhorn. Or if you don't want to use your Warhorn, Card of Small Miracles or Super Duper Water Shooter works really well. For the other two slots, you're going to want some combination of AoEs and maybe burns. It's worth keeping in mind that the debuff cap exists, so we can only apply 6 burns, but we can also just detonate the burns and then apply more. That's why I think Detonate is actually really good in this fight, just because the boss doesn't really ask you to keep debuffs on it. You have to hit it while it's debuffed, so the other sealed authorities count as debuffs, and you only have to hit it a few times, and then you can just not debuff for a bit. So detonating it to apply more burns has been much higher damage from my testing, and this was the best combo for the other two units that I had. Mercedes being the most important one, I would say, and then this other slot. You can use Carrot, you can use Araminta, you can use Charlotte. Whoever you have built, just use them. Ideally, you want to minimize the amount of resources you're using here, because you're just going to be doing Robin solo by the end. Let's take a look at Mercedes first. Mercedes, you can just give her whatever normal DPS gear you're giving on her. This is like new player DPS set. She should have better gear, ideally. Though just with the way the gear works out, she's probably one of the better geared units on this team. Or maybe the best geared unit, rather. She does take the greater attack buff because of this immense power thing, giving her 15% attack. Coupled with Robin's pretty low base speed or base attack, she does end up taking the greater attack buff, maybe if I split it. But even then, the 15% probably covers this. But Mercedes by herself still does a ton of damage, very good unit, and being free and good in Earth Expedition and Nightmare Farah, very, very nice to invest in. For her artifact, Magic of Friends is an option. You could also do something like Call Aldra if you want, but Magic of Friends works fine for me. The boss doesn't block extra attacks, it blocks counter attacks, and this is not a counter attack, this is an extra attack. And then we have Carrot. So Carrot, you build her pretty much the same as Robin. I do think you want Carrot slower than Robin, just so that you can have, at the very start, you can have Robin apply her burns, Carrot apply her burns, then Robin extends, and then Carrot detonates. Is I think the ideal setup you want there. Ideally, I'd want Carrot a bit slower, probably more like 190 to 200, so I can also slow Robin down. And then Besides that, 105 effectiveness with a good amount of attack. You can see my gear is a bit not great here. If I had the gear for it, which I'm definitely going to try to do on my main, I think you can frontline Carrot. This Carrot is a little bit too squishy, but a bit more bulk on Carrot should be able to frontline, and we can get slightly more burns because of her S2. And then her artifact, if you have Etika Scepter, you should use Etika Scepter. Etika Scepter is just going to be a more consistent version of Candlestick. But if you don't have Etika Scepter, or you ran out, because let's say you're using Etika Scepter on Aramintha maybe, you could use Candlestick on Carrot as well. I only have Candlestick on this account, so I'll be using Candlestick on her. This just lets her spam S3 more. For her enhances, it's just get the effect chances on her S3. If you find yourself needing the barrier on S2, you can, but it's not really that important. And we just take a look at her skill tree. For her skill tree, I grabbed these three just for the stats. And then this one, the CR push on her S1 actually doesn't matter, so you don't need this one. This one you don't need, it's just one unlock to get this. This makes it so that her S3 has a 100% chance to land burns. And this one gives her a bit of damage reduction, which didn't let her go front anyways, but I picked this up. The important ones is just the ones that give stats, plus the one that makes her S3 100% chance. And she also has a nice little flat attack imprint for everybody. Like I mentioned, this is the best team, and this team does start consistently two-shotting. I bet you could do it at RC2 if you had a good enough gear. I've seen people say that it starts... I've had people tell me that they were two-shotting at RC3 already. So this is going to be the best team, but like I mentioned, with all of the... Whatever, I've said it like 20 times now, the Robin solos or whatever, so between Carrot, Aramintha, or Charlotte, use whoever you have geared. And let's take a look at their stats too. So Aramintha, I did not give her an artifact, but you should give her Candlestick, ideally, or Etika Scepter. Etika Scepter is going to be better than Candlestick, especially since Aramintha is never going to be frontlining. And then for her EE, if you are running Carrot on the team, then use the Burn EE. If Carrot is not on the team, like let's say you're doing Aramintha Mercedes, then you want to use the one that detonates burn effects. Her build, same as Robin, same as Carrot. You just want to have her with attack, 105 effectiveness, and a bit of speed. The bulk doesn't matter too much, but you're not going to have any other stats to put on your gear subs anyways, so you might as well just take the bulk. And then also her skill enhances. Her skill enhances is just -1 turn on her S2, and then the effect chances on her S3. I might as well flash her gear real quick. It's just, yeah. It's just attack and speed. And we can also take a look at Charlotte. With Charlotte, I gave her Victoria's Flag. Could use any damage boosting artifact, really. Her EE doesn't matter at all. None of these EEs do anything. Like, they're all useless. So just give her the one that gives her the most HP. But you also, honestly, don't need that much bulk, because the boss's Death Pen on S1 doesn't apply to Knight Heroes, so it's not going to apply to Charlotte. This Charlotte is very scuffed just because of the way new player gear is. You don't have a lot of gear for units that guaranteed crit. Charlotte does not need crit chance. I put her in Grace of Growth because she's an actual DPS and I didn't want to spend all the molos on her. She's definitely a very expensive option. Kind of only usable if you had her built from years ago, I think. But she always crits, and I don't have a lot of gear that has no crit chance. So she looks very, very scuffed. With better gear, she definitely would do better damage, but because of how expensive she is, and all the units were pretty close, like I mentioned, I don't think it matters that much. But this is generally for Charlotte, you're just looking for crit chance, or crit damage and attack with a little bit of speed. And that's it for Charlotte. She's very easy to gear. First, she's easy to gear because she only needs a few stats, but you need to actually dodge all the other stats, so it can be annoying. That's it for the general Robin teams. For the non-Robin teams I tested, there was one I used, Surin here, with Charlotte, and like I mentioned, Charlotte is probably, what is the word, misleading for her damage numbers, just because Charlotte is kind of a premium option. Or likely you'd be using Ball, or I don't have Kana here, but Kana or something. But your Surin gear, I ungeared her already. Artifact, I just gave her some sort of attack boosting artifact. You can give her pretty much any attack boosting artifact, really, or I think you kind of end up at the cap, but you could give her Dust Devil if you want to, if you find yourself having situations where you'd rather have her S1 twice for extra bleeds. Dust Devil would also be pretty good. For her gear, though, it would literally be the same as Aramintha Robin. It's just the attack ones with 105 effectiveness. Where is the boots? Something like this would work okay. Like you're just, yeah, it's just a bunch of attack, 105 effectiveness with a bit of bulk. You might want a bit more bulk than this, honestly. But if you give Hazel, I didn't have my Hazel enhanced. If you enhanced Hazel, her skills, and also give her a healing artifact, this is probably fine. With like about 200 speed, maybe even a bit lower, is fine. That's it for Surin. That's it for everyone's stats. I'm going to switch to my main account so we can see a better set of builds, and then we can take a look at the run with the best team. So I'm on my main account now. We can look at everyone's stats, but let's first go over Rift Pets. So your best in slot Rift Pet is going to be Reforging Materials, Extra Equipment, and Lesser Charm. With Equipment and Lesser Charm being the priority ones, I think Reforging Materials is the third most important one. So this should be your general Rift Pet with all S-rank skills. I have 2 Rift Pets just because I have so many pet tickets at this point. Mine also I have one that has Season Score instead of Rift Energy. It really isn't that necessary. The Reforging Materials are just way more valuable in the long run. But because I have 2, I'll be using this one. And now we can take a look at everyone's stats. Your Guardian doesn't matter. I should extend this to 30. First up, let's take a look at Robin. For Robin, I have her on Prophetic Candlestick, and you're mainly just looking to give her as much attack as you can while still reaching at least 95 effectiveness, because Hazel does give 10 effectiveness in her skill tree. I can't, like, I tried dropping her to 95 effectiveness to get more attack. I can't do it. So we're just going to leave it like this. This is fine. I'll show her individual gear pieces here. This is just max attack. This is not necessarily max attack. I didn't want to steal my crit DPS pieces for this. This is also just my best attack scaling bruiser boots. These are some of the hitsec gear from the showdown shop, with just a random chest for some bulk and a bit more effectiveness. So really, this slot doesn't really matter. This could be more speed if you want to. And then next, let's take a look at Hazel. Hazel, I just wanted her faster than Robin. I don't think it actually like mattered, but maybe I slow her down to be just barely faster than Robin. Maybe it would give me 1 extra turn with a DPS at the end, but I already 2-shot, so it's pretty minor. She doesn't need any F-res. This is so I can use her in Vera. And her bulk also doesn't really matter that much because she's not frontlining. So you can just give her enough speed to have her be faster than Robin so she can apply attack buff at the very start of the fight. For Artifact, I'm using Warhorn. You could also opt to give her Candlestick too if you have like 50 Candlesticks. But any attack boosting artifact also works fine. If you don't have Warhorn, or rather if you're already using Warhorn, Super Duper Water Shooter is pretty good. 5% attack to everybody, and also 7.5 to 10 effectiveness depending on how much you enhance it. So this could even help you cheat even more effectiveness. Now let's take a look at Mercedes. Mercedes, I have her on her team imprint just because I wanted more attack on Garrett and Robin. You could just self-imprint her, it's pretty minor. Her gear is just random destruction crit gear. This isn't even really like my best destruction crit gear. This is just good enough to do Nightmare Vera and Earth Expedition, so this definitely could be upgraded. Rage set probably works. Thinking about the way the damage dealt versus damage taken stuff works, most of the stuff in this boss is all just damage taken, so Rage being a damage dealt mod should be pretty much full effectiveness unless they change something in the code since the last rift. For artifact, I'm using Magic for Friends. It activates, the boss doesn't block extra attacks, it only blocks counter attacks, so this works fine. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it for Mercedes. Lastly is Carrot. For Carrot, you also just build her with a bunch of attack and at least 95 effectiveness because Hazel gives us 10. You want her slower than Robin. This is just for speed tuning purposes. I've made it so that no speed RNG, she'll always move after Robin. Though, actually, I could shorten the speed gap more because it's 2 turns. But anyways, basically, you want Robin to S2, then Carrot S3, then Robin S3, then Carrot S1, so Carrot doesn't detonate the burns before Robin extends them, at the very start anyways. Beyond that, Etika Scepter is going to just do a bunch of things with Carrot's cooldowns, and Candlestick on Robin's going to change her cooldowns a lot, so it's going to change after the first turn, but at least for the first turn, I like having this tuning. Etika Scepter is going to be Carrot's best in slot. You could also give her Candlestick if you don't have Etika Scepter. And then her gear, you can see here, I kind of just gave her a bunch of attack, some effectiveness, and then you do want a bit of bulk. You actually don't need that much, but a bit of bulk helps. Just to make it so you can have her in the front slot. If she's not tanky enough to put in the front slot, then just put her at the bottom and move Hazel to the front instead. And I have her plus 15 just because she's cheap. And I also had her plus 30 from back when she was good in PvP. But for her, I've gone over it already, but I'll go over it again. It's just these 3 ones that boost her stats. Plus this one here that makes her S3 100% burn chance is all that you need. The damage reduction here can be nice too. That is it for everyone's stats. Of course, we're using the Ranger debuff extension device, and we can take a look at the run and see how much damage we do.
조용히 살고 싶었는데요. 당신에 대한 분석은 모두 끝냈습니다. 서둘러 주세요. 모두 쉬나 싶었는데. 착하게 살지 그랬어. 내가 할 말은 없나?
상황을 보아하니 제가 이길 가능성이 높습니다.
치네.
계획대로군요. 특별히 고안하는 대책을 보여.
장난은 끝났어. 애송이다.
서둘러 주세요. 당신에 대한 부탁합니다. 모두 끝냈습니다.
그잖아.
아이총 지연.
So we did 55% of the boss's HP in our first attempt. On a previous run I had earlier, I did probably more like 60 to 70% of the boss's HP. Though here we had worse RNG, we got resisted a lot, and also you're going to have a lot of variance in your runs just off of Etika Scepter and Candlestick, but this is a relatively consistent 2-shot at RC2, so pretty satisfied with this team. And we can take a look at the battle results too. Let's take a look at damage. So, somebody did mention that Carrot's Detonate might be stealing damage from other people. I don't think Carrot does have greater attack buff, but surely Carrot is not doing all of this damage by herself. Kind of hard to say, but Mercedes is still contributing a decent amount of damage. We can try swapping Mercedes out for Aramintha. On my new account testing, Mercedes did way more damage, but I don't have Aramintha built on this account anyways, and like I mentioned, because we're just going to be doing Robin Duo, most likely at RC15, and then Robin Solo at RC21, I'm not spending materials to build Aramintha. I will be satisfied with my Carrot Mercedes team. But that is it for the Rift Guide. This Rift, honestly, pretty nice. Like, we got Robin, we're 2-shotting at RC2 immediately. This is pretty nice. I think the good thing is just, we have Robin, we have to roll her, sure. Mercedes is free, Hazel is 3-star, both of these units are used a ton of PvE, and there's so many rolls for this last slot. Carrot, Aramintha, Charlotte. Funnily enough, all 3 of these are units past their prime in their respective RTA metas. Aramintha more was like a peak. I feel like Carrot and Charlotte was stronger for a much longer time. But a lot of old players are going to have these units built, and we'll get to use them for a little bit longer. It's been a while since I've used Carrot. Anyways, next up, I'll push the Rift levels a lot more. I'll try to hit RC15 and RC21 quickly to see if I can one-shot, or at least start doing solos or duos at those points. But this is it for now. This is the starter early Rift Guide, and I'll see you guys later.